Everybody got your mic on?
Right here, the 1A. Something there. Skip Jones 2, 3.
4.
Call the meeting to order. Good afternoon. Welcome. I think we have one Zoom participant at this time, and those of you in the audience, welcome. This is our the second meeting of the Redistricting Committee for Walton County, and we'll have a series of meetings, and it's by all means we encourage public participation as we review the information that's been presented to us and ultimately decide on the redistricting as needed to complete the statutory duties that are required by this committee. So the first item, we do definitely have a quorum. We've got, I guess, all members present. So we meet the quorum with no problem. Before we get started any further, we had a committee member since our last meeting who resigned, and so the District 5 Commissioner has made a new appointment, and so I'll let that new appointee introduce himself and say anything else he wants to say at this time. Mr. Shipman.
I guess that's me. I'm Gary Shipman. I live in South Walton County. I'm a lawyer in South Walton County, and Tony asked me to do it, so here I am.
Thank you, Mr. Shipman. Next item on the agenda, request to approve the minutes of the September 1st meeting. Committee members, you've had a chance to review the draft minutes. Are there any deletions or additions or changes otherwise?
Motion to approve.
And a motion to approve and a second by Mr. Simmons. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion passes.
Here, I'll abstain. I was not here for that meeting.
Okay.
No, you can vote on it unless you see an issue with it. All you're doing is approving the form of it. The abstention's only for purposes of conflicts. So everybody's allowed to vote on it. There's no reason to.
Well, I wasn't even on the commission, but I assume I'm allowed to vote because I voted on it.
Yes, sir. The issue is not that the issue, while in non-formal boards, you're right, you would not approve minutes that you aren't familiar with, because we're operating under the same voting rules that apply to the Board of County Commissioners and its other advisory committees. You are required by state law to vote yes or no on all items except those which you have a conflict of interest and are required to recuse from. So there is no valid abstention in Florida law on these issues.
All right, item 3. We need to determine the meeting locations for our September 30th and October 14th meetings. We discussed in the first meeting on alternating the locations. We'll have a couple meetings here in Freeport, and then alternate. We'll have a meeting in South Walton at the commission chambers there on Highway 331, and then also a meeting in Defuniak in the courthouse. So I need a motion. Yes, sir.
Are we just gonna forget about the folks up around Paxton. You got a town up there, and I think I know there's no Zoom, but I think as long as we advertise it, there's no Zoom available, and that we're gonna have a meeting up there, I think we're probably covered. That'd be a question Clay would have to answer.
The board's policy is that it will have Zoom where it is available. The Board of County Commissioners has already recognized that at certain facilities and certain county facilities as well, technology is not going to allow Zoom to happen in those rooms or meeting. So if this board wants to meet somewhere where Zoom's not available, that's not a problem. The Zoom policy enables you to use it. It does not force you to conform your meetings around Zoom.
So, if we're discussing this, we do like South Walton, Defuniak, Paxton, and then finish up here in Freeport?
That's it.
You want to make that in form of a motion?
Have public discussion.
We are.
Yeah, I have a motion first. Make a motion that
The motion is to have a meeting in South Walton, one in Defuniak, and one in Paxton.
and you want to do those in the order of these dates that we
That's
have?
fine. That's fine.
I'll say.
Okay, so that will be, October 14th in South Walton.
September 30th first. Mr.
Oh, yeah, I'm on the wrong month. Yeah, September 30th in South Walton. October 14th in Defuniak Springs. October 28th in Paxton. That's the motion.
I'll second it.
Now, wait a minute, is there a fourth meeting after that, or is those the
There-
three?
There is, yes. We've got another meeting date.
I would like, if we're gonna have a fourth meeting, because the majority of the population is south of the bay, to have the last meeting south of the bay.
Okay, let's, should we amend that motion, or should we just continue with that? And,
Oh, it's if the person who made the motion wishes to amend, he can amend, and then the second one need to be amended. Otherwise, you go forward with that motion, or we can have somebody make a substitute motion. We got a few options.
Well, we had, if we're in discussion, we did have set, our deadline's November the 15th. So when we talked last time, it was, we went and scheduled out 3 meetings, and then we were going to make a determination whether or not we to do one in November if we weren't finished. It's your motion. I mean, I second it as it is, but if you, I mean, that's up to y'all. If y'all think y'all need us down there. We've got so much technology here, and this is such a great room. I'd say finish here in Freeport, but.
Add to the motion that I made that the fourth meeting be held here at Freeport because of Zoom and is centrally located for the citizens of South Walton and of the north end of the county.
Do we not have Zoom in the South Walton Annex?
We do.
Well, I mean, here's my concern. The population south of the bay outnumbers the rest of the county, period.
No, sir, it does not.
Well, it comes pretty darn close to it.
No, sir, it does not.
The numbers I have, it says 77,000, and then you're subtracting what for the inmates?
73,470, so it's actually about 12.
The inmates were a total of 1,951 people.
So what does that equate to?
In the inmate area. The South Walton area,
South Walton here is approximately 30,000 people, with the balance being north of the bay, about 44,000.
Okay. So the largest area that we're talking about is South Walton. The largest population.
If you combine the whole geographic area, but if you split north and south, the largest area you're talking about is north of the bay, Intercoastal Waterway, which is 44,000, which is 50% higher than South Walton.
Okay, so right now there will be 4 meetings, because the last one was here too, right? So 4 meetings north of the bay and 1 south of the bay. I think there should be 2 south of the bay. Because if you're going to split it that way, Paxton, Defuniak, and Freeport would all be north of the bay. I think you need to give the community an opportunity. And there are going to be a lot of people, I think, south of the bay, they're going to want to come to this. So I agree, there should be one in Paxton, there should be one in Defuniak. But if we're going to have 5 meetings, I think 2 should be south of the bay.
So your amended motion, did you amend your motion?
I do need an amended second.
I'll amend my second.
Yeah, that was my next question. I assume there's like a city hall or something in Paxton that we can,
House,
Tax center.
You want to restate that motion so we don't get lost in it?
make a motion that we have the next 3 meetings, one in South Walton, one in Defuniak, one in Paxton, and then we come back to Freeport for the final meeting because it's centrally located.
That's my second. If we go with the way we've been doing it, it'd be 2 weeks out from the,
November 11.
oh, that's right, that's why.
If you're keeping it on a Thursday, if you go to you're probably better off doing the week before, even though it's a 1-week turnaround, because you have Board of County Commissioner and other public board meetings on that second week of the month. You're gonna have a limited opportunity with those.
So if you'll amend your motion for the final meeting, or for the November 4th meeting to be here in Freeport.
My motion to include the date of November the 4th for the final and 4th meeting.
Well, just say that, I would just say the 4th meeting, because we agreed that we set ourselves a November 15th deadline, so if something goes awry,
The fourth meeting will be held on November the 4th.
I'll amend my second to match that.
These are all 4 PM start.
Okay, yes, and those are all at 4 PM.
And I just question that, can they start earlier than that? I know last year, look, I started 2, I don't know how long these meetings are gonna be.
Well, for now, I think we'll hang with 4.
I think you're more likely to get public participation if it's 4 or later because people are working.
Okay, so we had a motion and a second, several of those. We finally got it worked out. Yes,
There was discussion earlier from Robert as a reminder to everybody that we said we would have 3 additional meetings. We would have a 4th if necessary. Does this motion obligate us to a 4th additional meeting?
It obligates you to where your 4th additional meeting is going to be if you have it. I mean, if y'all agreed on the maps today, you really need to go around the county, but I get, technically, once your job's done, your job's done. We as staff can't tell you when not to do it, and so it's up to you. I would say you're not obligated to have that last meeting. It is set, and that's a calendaring purpose.
Thank you.
Why don't we then, as a suggestion, we just have the motion that we're going to set meetings on September 30th, the 14th, and the 28th in South Walton, Defuniak, and Paxton. And then on the 28th, we can decide whether we need another one, and then we can argue over where it's going to be.
Well, we've already got, he's already got his motion and got his second, so.
Well, but he also can amend his motion if he'd like. So I'm just making that as a suggestion here.
It has to be advertised, correct? We have to
Yeah.
have a lead of 2 weeks.
Ms. Ray, if we could have Ms. Hinote perhaps chime in.
I'm sorry.
No, I think she's addressing your questions, what I was gonna say.
Absolutely. I would just offer a suggestion, possibly, is because the motion's already been made and amended many times, so just for clarity, after you have your South Walton meeting, the Defuniak meeting, the Paxton meeting, if you wish to cancel the next meeting because you're finished and you're done, you can certainly make a motion to do that. and we can run an ad in the paper canceling the meeting. That is no problem. Anytime you meet and you decide that you don't need another meeting, it's no problem to cancel that. That just keeps the minutes very clean, and the website will post it on the website so everybody knows, and it just makes it very clean.
Oh, that makes sense.
Okay, public comment regarding any of those items.
Yes, sir. My name is Barbara Morano. In all due respect, Mr. McIntyre, Paxton is very, very far. You're asking me, I'm in my 70s, to drive home very, very late at night. You're also asking me if I choose not to drive home very late, I can't even access by video. I really feel that you're not, I really feel that part of the motion on Paxton is very unfair to all the citizens of Walton County. We've had many meetings at Freeport, which is the center of the county. As Mr. Shipman said, we're not on South Walton. I'm going to leave home even now in the dark, and quite frankly, I don't want to leave, I don't want to drive up to Paxton for a very serious reason. I can get into an accident. I really don't think you should do that, especially without a Zoom option. This meeting is for all the citizens, not just for a small group. And I think that's a very selfish move, in my opinion. I know that's my opinion, but I really think you all have to think about this. And I think it's just putting an unfair burden on people. And even handicapped people will not be able to access anything that goes on in Paxton. This is not a good way to start redistricting. And it's not a north and a south issue. It is not. I am all for all Walton. But this does not reflect that. Thank you.
Our technical support specialist just informed us that he believes he can get the technology needed to have video and Zoom in Paxton.
I think one of the, may I?
Sure.
I think one of the issues that we do need to keep in mind is there's a lot of people in Paxton that can't use Zoom. Internet's just not there, which I'm sure our technical support guy could confirm that. It's not, and they are citizens of the county, so we've got to find a date that they get to see what's going on, because just like you, they would have to drive at night to get back to where they are. About 20 miles.
Well, I also believe, though, that this process is to give everybody an opportunity to have input. And while I'm not super excited about driving, 60 miles up to Paxton, I do think that those people should have an opportunity to have input on this. Just like, I think everybody should. I do, I tend to think that the more people you get, the better we are, which is why I want 2 meetings in South Walton. But I think the people in Paxton need to have their opportunity too. Same thing with the Funiac Freeport. I'd just like it to be evenly distributed in terms of the meeting.
Any other public comment?
Hi, Donna Johns. I would just like to ask that you have the last meeting in South Walton, because this meeting right here is for everyone, and the majority of the people here in the audience are from South Walton, and we did drive 25 minutes to get here. I don't have a problem with that, but I would like to see the last meeting in South Walton, so the big bulk majority of people will be able to come, and we're here, and we would be definitely at the next one with a lot more people, and we'd appreciate that.
Thank you.
One other comment I just to bring up to assuage some of the fears here is I would not want us, if we're going to do that third meeting in Paxton, I would want to make sure there is a fourth meeting. just like the county attorney said, we could declare our job done and finished in Paxton, and I do think that would be a little bit unfair to everybody if we finished up there. Even though we may be done, I think we'd still need to have that one final meeting somewhere, just because that's so far removed from everybody.
Certainly.
Mr. Chairman, may I make a suggestion? Perhaps flip Paxton and South Walton's dates. Keep everything else the same for the time being. So your next meeting is in Paxton, not South Walton, but then your 10/28 meeting is in South Walton. If you are able to finish up in South Walton, then you don't have to come back here and you can choose to do that. The simple reality is we're going to know within probably the next week what the technical limitations on staff are. They do have 5G cellular in Paxton, right around Town Hall at least. They also do have the broadband through WildStar is attached up there. So we're hoping that they'll be able to set that up for the county up there at City Hall. But if in case there are technical difficulties, we're not 3 meetings deep into the process at that point in time, and then you definitely do have a meeting in South Walton on the 28th, and so you're wrapping up somewhere where you know you have a large room and you also have Zoom availability. That would alleviate the issue of ending in an area that may have less capability or access.
I think that would be an excellent idea.
I'll amend my motion one more time, and this is it.
I'll amend my second.
Okay, we're gonna have the meeting of September the 30th in Paxton. We'll have the October 14th meeting in Defuniak Springs. We'll have the October 28th meeting in South Walton. And we'll tentatively identify November the 4th as a 4th meeting, if needed, at this location.
Excellent. Amended motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second. I'll amend my second.
Any public comments? Further public comments on the amended motion? Seeing none in the room, we'll go to Zoom now. And Miss Melissa Bailey. Miss Bailey, are you there?
Sure. So just some input about the Zoom. They have to switch me to a panelist, which takes a second because they have to kick me out and then reconnect me. And then I have to turn on the video and the audio. So there is going to be a little lag, just so everybody knows that. Also, if all the panelists could actually speak into their microphones, it would be easier for us to hear on this platform. A couple of questions about the Paxton issue and the ability to do Zoom up there. I believe all the libraries were just given funding from the BCC to allow Zoom capabilities at all the libraries. So if having a meeting in Paxton for whatever reason or time frame or whatever, wouldn't the library, and if they have a meeting room up there, be available for Zoom capabilities for those who can't or unable to drive to Paxton?
The libraries those would cover, I do not believe actually covers the Paxton Library. Paxton has a shared library agreement that it works with Florella. The Flowers View one is in a trailer, for lack of a better word. So don't know that that's an option. City Hall is a pretty wide open space, as is the City Ag Building. It's just going to be a question of figuring out which one the best location is for internet access. But the Ag Building's a large facility in Paxton, as is Town Hall is a pretty wide open room. And we've done a joint meeting with the BCC and the Town Council of Paxton, in which we had approximately 15 to 20 citizens present dealing with the mobility plan. And then we certainly have the school as well. We could probably reach out to the school district if we needed to use anything at the school campus as well, be it their gymnasium or otherwise.
We'll work that out. So that means that whatever meeting in whatever location in Paxton, there should be the ability to broadcast for those of us who want to attend but don't want to drive or can't drive to Paxton. Is that what I'm hearing?
That is the intent.
Okay. And then I would like to address Mr. Shipman's concern about having 2 meetings in South Walton. There are 5 districts currently, is that correct? In Walton County, and 2 of those districts are in South Walton, is that correct?
Well, I think currently there are 3 districts that touch South Walton. There's only one that is totally encompassed in South Walton.
That is correct.
But going along with, there is a possibility that South Walton may need a little bit more exposure to facilitate public input.
I think based on the maps that I have looked at, because the 2 districts that are significantly over the population are District 1 and District 5, which both District 5 is entirely in South Walton. District 1 is partially in South Walton. Any redistricting, in order to get the population numbers, I believe, will, out of necessity, have to require a redrawing in all the models I've seen of whatever you do south of the bay. In some fashion or form because of the population numbers. I don't know.
So are you saying that South Walton district may become, or maybe 2 full districts in South Walton because of the redistricting?
That's a high likelihood in my opinion. Or at least 2 districts that are predominantly South Walton. Right now, I think the way it's kind of laid out, there's one main district in South Walton, which is District 5, and then District 1 is kind of Point Washington, I guess, Inlet Beach, and then District 4 is sort of the far western end of South Walton, plus some stuff north of the bay. I see those districts changing, but then again, I do have to admit, I don't see any way to reach the population numbers without literally redrawing the boundaries of every single district.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman, we're back on trying to set these meeting dates. We're going to have an agenda item for discussing districting.
Did, Ms. Bailey,
Yes, sir.
did you have a specific question regarding the meeting locations and dates? Or a comment?
I was just in favor of South Walton having 2 meetings in that area because we do have 2 districts. I feel like that would be beneficial. And if you swapped it back to South Walton on the 30th, that would give Paxton time to facilitate the Zoom capabilities.
Okay. Thank you. Do you have any further comments regarding that?
No, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. So we have a motion and a second. Ready to vote? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed?
Nay.
Did you get that, Marty? Okay, thank you. Okay. Item 4, presentation of committee maps, ideas, or suggestions. I would first like to ask administration, as far as keeping up with the maps and the district, proposed district changes, I noticed in the 2011 information, there was a schedule of the maps that were presented, along with a checklist of things that they did or did not contain as far as each individual map. Do we know who compiled this, and was this a running file, or was this compiled after things were voted on?
Back then, Mr. Pilcher, Ken Little was the staff liaison person who handled that,
Okay,
and he took care of that. But if you would like, if the committee wishes to have the same format, I will learn very quickly, and we can accommodate.
okay. Yeah, I think we need some way to keep our list current and to be able to look back and as a reference to tell what happened.
Yes, sir, if
So
you'll just make sure that I know, sort of like Exhibit 1, 2, 3, or A, B, C, however you want to do it,
Okay.
so we can label the maps, and I know exactly which ones you're talking about, then I can certainly keep up with that.
Okay. I think that as long as the maps are titled and we retain that same title as we go through that inventory would be appropriate. So I would like to ask Mr. Kevin Laird, if you could at this time, Kevin, to walk us through the presentation of the maps that we have to date.
The first map is just showing the current districts with the current populations. I did subtract out of it the population for the Walton Correctional Institution. That's where your numbers come from for the populations on that. With those removed, there's a total population in the county of 73,470. And the optimal population will be 14,694. The differences from optimal are listed on that first map in front of you. Second page is showing the area around the jail that had to be modified. And there's a table up top that shows the population. The total population as listed from the Census Bureau for each one of those census blocks that were affected by the correctional facilities. In the Census Bureau data, it's listed as correctional facilities for adults. 4 census blocks were affected. 2 of them are completely zeroed out. If you look on the map on the left, you'll see census blocks 1009 and 1010 are now both blank compared left to right. Census blocks 1004 and 1012 had people subtracted from it. Due to that, the census data does not supply information for those inmates at this time that I've been able to find about what race they are or whether they're Hispanic or not. So some of the table data later on may be skewed because I can't subtract those out of anything because I don't have any numbers to go by. Next page was the first submission for basically a test map for redistricting. Now, y'all can review these as you wish. It does get the population close. It's not perfect. I don't think you'll wind up with anything being perfect no matter what. The districts are close but not perfect. Same thing will be for Plan 2. Now, the plan is labeled as 2A in there. This does change a bunch of things and does move around a lot of the districts. It does put 2 full districts south of the bay. It does make the district population for what would be District 3 a little bit high, but you may not be able to work around that. Plan 3A is again just another change. It does have partial districts south of the bay, no full district. The only full district would still be District 5. It does pull a lot of people from Freeport down into a district south of the bay. And then the final one is map plan 4A. Now, the area here, you'll notice that there is a apparent gap for District 1. It's mainly because of the water boundary there that is in the bay. There are connecting census blocks. There's no population in them, but that does connect up with that, based on the census block. It's just underwater at that area.
Clay, is there any legal, in terms of where we're trying to make the size, understanding that we can't make it exact, what is the variance that we're allowed?
We're actually allowed a much broader amount of variance than, say, the congressional or the state level. We're not set with a specific number. We're supposed to aim for equal population while achieving contiguity, compactness of the districts, making sure we're adhering to existing political boundaries, making sure that we're dealing equalness in terms of racial equality and those things. So it's not a magic number threshold. So I think that's why we, at the first meeting, Mr. Shipman asked to see what is the ideal number, and then let's talk about how much we can even those out. The simple reality is you're going to have bigger issues, I think, dealing with just trying to get some of these compact and contiguous. You know, I think if we look at 4 is going to have a potential contiguity challenge there. That could be an issue with districts 2 and 1 that we would have to play around with if we even wanted to. And in that one specifically, District 2 certainly has a compactness issue. And I'm not trying to pick on, if anybody up here submitted 4, I apologize up front to you. This is not, I'm just using that because it's the one in front of me. But it's not as though we have to be within 5%, one voter. It's not that tight. Now, if we get a huge variance between the highest volume district and the lowest volume, I think the rule that's been challenged once before is about 10% variance between the top and bottom. You might have a rub there.
So in other words, if the highest is 1,000 voters more than the lowest, we're not going to have a problem with that.
Yeah, I'm not seeing that an issue. It's if the top district's 10% above the ideal and the bottom district's 10% below, it's not going to matter where your middle 3 are. They're going to say that's a problem.
So right now, with those changes in District 2, if I'm looking at this correctly, Kevin, that District 2 is 4,800 short of an optimal. Is that right?
District 2 is approximately 4,856.
And then District 1 is about 4,300 over.
Yes, sir.
Et cetera. Okay.
And I will say this to the board. We talked about this. I know we've got a couple more board members who were not here at the first time. The issue of prison population is a messy one to deal with. It is the strongest recommendation I give you. Florida has no legislative intent on this. They have no statute governing. We don't have a county ordinance governing. I don't think it wise for the county to adopt such an ordinance at this time, and I don't see our legislature wading into that either. From our perspective, I would start with them omitted and see how far we get. If for some reason the district that then encompasses the state prison is somewhat under at that point in time, we certainly have at least a defensible basis that that is not as big of an issue because we know there are 1,200 people sitting there. If somehow the district that ends up with a prison in it becomes the largest by 2,000 or 3,000 voters, we've got another problem the opposite way. So we will review that at the back side of that. The other side is the prison population is a moving target in one sense. They counted as of that April 1 date. They gave us 1,851 because you actually have about 100 people, give or take, who live in that general area. We're not entirely sure where, but they do, per the census blocks. But the prison has consistently reported under 1,800 people for the past 4 years. So backing them out altogether is why you want to start with this area. So that's the other thing, just remember, wherever that gets situs, and we may ultimately need to drop a pin on that in the future, so we show which district that falls into. As of now, it is in what would be District 2 on your existing map.
Well, the reason I ask, like, let's take the map 2A. If you look at the population, District 5 would be the largest, and it's 15,759. And I guess District 4 would be the smallest, 13,741. Is that degree of variance in population going to be a problem?
My initial take is that we'd want it a little tighter than that, but I think we could sustain a legal challenge to that based off what I'm looking at there. Because you're going to have another district that if you added the prison population back in would be also at 15,000. So I think you're pretty close. You're within 900 on the high end, and then on the low end, you're on 900 on both sides, right, Kevin? Give or take?
953 and, well, District 5 on that one is 1,065 high for
Yeah.
Plan 2A.
Okay.
It's a little bit hard to read on there.
Gotcha.
Big map. I did want to bring up one
So
thing.
yeah, I think we can make that work looking at where 3 and 5 sit right now with 4. The other issue with 4 is when you take into account if you maintain existing political boundaries, one thing we would be able to substantiate there is that 4 is actually creeping into that scenario into existing political boundaries and creating a split to keep the population to do more so would be a bigger problem than the variance in population. So from a threshold issue, I think we could sustain 2.
I did want to ask one thing. Because of the inconsistency with the race and population material, do y'all want to keep those numbers in that small table at the bottom? They were in there in the 2011 redistricting, but if they were not, it would allow me to make the table bigger and you could see the total population information a whole lot better.
That might be a separate spreadsheet to provide separate from the maps that did correlate the map.
And Kevin, I may just be confused on this, but like when I'm looking at Plan 2, is the color coding on the proposed districts and the color coding on the map matching? Are we just totally renaming the districts? Because, for example, the pink would currently be District 5. Are you then making that District 3, or is that just a coloring problem?
The pink area is District 3 on the
District
southeast.
But currently, where the pink area is District 5. I'm looking at.
Yes, sir.
So why would you be swapping the numbers like that?
That was the request of the person that submitted the plan.
Kevin, couldn't we, but we could look at, or even Mr. Atkinson, we could look at district names after we look at getting boundaries balanced, correct?
That is correct.
So first thing we need to be looking at is getting our geography right to match our math. Then we can assign the names to make them work however we need them to work at the second stage.
But isn't it a problem if you take, like, for example, looking at this map, this 2A, and what we're calling District 3 on this map is essentially most of what District 5 is today. And then you're moving District 5 somewhere else. Well, isn't that, I mean, and the whole purpose of this is that we, to the extent you can maintain the current districts within their boundaries, you do so?
That's not a driving principle in this.
So we could move District 1 to the south end and our District 2 to the south end and District 5 to the north end.
That is correct.
And
While
so-
let me say this, while you're not required to keep people in their districts, you at least give some consideration to. The bigger rule than that, though, that we ask you to look at is if you're going to move somebody out of their district, consider what the effect has on an election. So for instance, we had an election last fall. If somebody got elected last fall and you're going to redistrict them to where they have to run next year for the school board or for the county, that's probably going to be more of a red flag if it can be avoided. Some counties don't have that luxury and they see these wild swings in seats. But yeah, you could completely renumber it. You can completely move people around however you see fit. And one of the things I discussed at the first meeting, and I've talked about with staff, it's helpful to have the pins of where these people are. I would tell you at the outset of this process, don't get too consumed with that, because when we've gone through this process every other time in Walton County history, we had different districts between the school board and the county. 2011 is the first time they became the same. So it's entirely possible, just by where those people live being at extreme edges or borders of a district, it may not be possible to achieve harmony between 10 different seats. So let's kind of hold that a little bit. I do think the geography and population is the first part.
The only reason I bring this up, because I know this is just a proposed map, but I would have a real problem if you're wanting to switch Commissioner Barker's current district with Commissioner Anderson's current district. I would find that to be highly suspect if that got done. So I'm kind of wondering, like, I'm looking at this map, and if the pink was still District 5 and the yellow was still District 4, I wouldn't be so questioning it. But why on earth would you move the northernmost district to the southernmost area and vice versa? That makes no sense to me. I realize we're just looking at this map as a proposal, but
The map's not about, we're at the point where it's just about the mathematics right now. The problem is we put these districts on these maps, we really just should call them A, B, C, D, E, where they don't mean anything till we get the mathematics worked out and get the geographic lines worked out. Then we go back and say, this is this district and this is that.
That would be a much better solution at this point for that exact reason.
And keep the same color code in the key.
But don't, because
Yeah, don't focus on who's
we can't
district
focus
two
on
and
who's
ten.
where, because we can't even defend creating a map based on who's where.
That's right.
I realize that, but when we start with geographically right now, districts 2 and 3 are at the extreme north, and districts 4 and 5 are extreme south end, and then we have maps created that sort of flip that. I realize we're moving these around, but we're sure not going to move it around that much. We're not going to take the northwest district and move it to the south end. That would,
Then the number would change when we got to that point. What we're trying to do now is focus on.
no,
the
that
numbers
doesn't
and
have
the-
anything to do with the number, Robert. You and I both know if you take the district in the very north end where Paxton is, and suddenly it becomes the district for the Seagrove, that's playing games.
But what you're trying to say is that we're setting who is in what now, and we're not. We're trying to decide the numbers and what the boundaries are gonna be.
For example, we could just agree on, say, this map right here, and then at the last moment, say, the pink area is District 5. And it's not, and it's not gonna be District 3.
And
So
that's
we can just
why,
number it, we
and
can
that's
number it
why
our
when I
own way.
looked at it to begin with, like the purple area stays District 1, and it's essentially where District 1 is now. The pink area is essentially District 5. The yellow has been essentially District 4. But somebody has taken what would have been Barker's area, which would now be, I think, green, and swapped. And I don't know whether that was where somebody's trying to play a game, in which case I'll have a problem, or whether that was just, it got messed up when you're menatiating the numbers.
Don't go by the number, go by A, B, C, and D.
And what's good about, and again, I'm not sure whose map is whose, but what's good about it is everybody has their opinion on their maps. And that everything gets to be looked at and see what happens. That's what this forum
So-
is about.
Is it a recommendation that as we recompile these maps, that the district designations be taken off and just labeled area A, B, C, et cetera, with the separate color codes, and at least to get the populations somewhat evened out?
That
Or
may
are
be-
you okay?
That may be what we need to do so we don't focus on the districts. Because if you look at to me, looking at the maps is you're looking at a solution that's like, here's 2 districts south of the bay. Is that what we're interested in to complete, since the 2011 redistricting, one of the things that I consistently heard, because I sat on that committee, was that we jumped the bay, and we had to make the numbers work, and that there are still people that don't live down in the south end of the county that are making decisions for the south end of the county. So I've heard for a decade now that they want 2 districts south of the bay. Here's a solution, 2 districts south of the bay. Here's a solution with 3 districts south of the bay. I mean, to me, that's what we need to be focusing
That's
on.
right.
And if
We can
that-
make these numbers work.
I totally
And if
agree.
that's what we're doing, I am, because I do, if I look at map 2A, which has 2 districts south of the bay, and it basically has the city of Freeport in a district, which I also think is important. I'm fine with that, unless, of course, we suddenly find that we want to move the current District 5 commissioner to the north end of the county and the current District 2 commissioner to the south end of the county, in which case I will have a problem with it.
Well, I think everybody here, also has got to realize that whatever we recommend coming out of the committee's got to be approved by the Board of County Commissioners and independently by the school district, so.
And has to withstand legal challenge.
And withstand a legal challenge, so between all those things, I don't think we're gonna see any dramatic changes, in how those representations work. I think, to me, the thing to do is focus on the numbers.
Then I would say that 2A, if the districts were corrected with some tweaking to try to balance those populations, is a great starting point, because it seems to be contiguous. It seems to have basic, what I would consider political interests. I guess the FUNIAC is kind of divided up a little bit.
Yeah, looking at the splitting there, I'm looking at the precinct maps here and the polling locations. That's something that could be adjusted. That's where, let's say you take 2A. Because I know some of you been on one of these before, some of you haven't. Best thing to do is coal maps. So you like 2A, if everybody generally likes 2A, okay, we're gonna keep it over here for a second. Take a look at 3A. Do we like 3A? Is there a problem with 3A? Can it? So vote to cull the maps, get rid of the maps you don't love. And then we start looking at the rest of the maps and we figure that out. Because ultimately what we'll do is when we come down to what we think the best map or several maps are, then we can do that little bit of refinement. Because take away everything the board just set up there, assuming all that's resolved, there are a couple of issues that I'd probably want to really make sure we're getting tight with on both existing political boundaries, where that's split, and how that works population base. If we can do that, it's going to help. Let's also be aware that obviously, you've got a huge chunk of this county that's not just the Bay, that's Eglin, that's never going to have anybody in it, but it has to fall into somebody's district. So that is going to make a compactness and contiguity issue a challenge on that side of the map. So, yeah, in this case, this one gets pretty close. We just got to play around with the Highway 90, I-10 segment corridor and that municipal boundary.
Yeah, the east side of the map's a challenge also, especially once you get south of, really south of Rock Hill Road.
Because of the plantation.
All the way to
city limits.
The water sound down there.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
I mean, you've got state-owned land and the Davis plantation and the Goosey property.
Well,
that splits to FUNIAC.
Well, I think based on what Clay just said, for example, for me, map number 4 I think is, I don't like that you have that gap. I don't think I mean, if you were asked me as a starting point to tweak, I liked 2A in the sense that I think it covers a lot of the issues that needs to be tweaked. Map number 4, I'd have a problem with, because I don't think we should be putting a gap where you have one district that has another district coming through and cutting it in two.
I will say this, from a legal perspective, 4 is gonna have a lot of work. You've got right now, each municipality has more than one district in it. You literally have one district that touches all 3 municipalities in the county. I'm not sure we're ever gonna get there on compactness based on that alone. I think there is a contiguity issue there that could become a huge problem. And then if I'm looking at the south end,
It doesn't fix the problem everybody's complained about for years now.
well, it doesn't do that. I was looking at where the polling places are. It doesn't create logical polling places if you have to expand polling places in the south end. And so we know that's going to have to happen. So that's not a driving factor, but if you treat the south end polling places or precincts in a geographic sense, that becomes a separate question. So, yeah, you've got a lot of work to do with 4. And trust us, staff will do whatever you want us. If you say 4A is our map, guys, let's make it work, we'll go to work for you. But you got some hurdles on that one, day one.
And I don't know how the mechanism of going about this, but I think 2A would be a good place to start. I think it needs to have some changes, but it seems to address a lot of the issues people don't like. I mean, it appears to create 2 districts south of the bay. It looks like Freeport is all in one district. Most of Defuniak is in one district. I think it would be nice to perhaps not have that finger coming down from District 2 into District 3, if that could be worked around. But I think this map comes the closest in my mind to where we need to be.
If you want, you can make again, I said we can make motions to coal maps. You could also make a motion to hold. And I'd say let's just use generic language and y'all pick which term you want. But in my mind, hold was what came to mind. Hold 2A for further consideration and refinement. And so let's make a motion, if that's where you're at, Mr. Shipman. If it gets a second, we'll take public comment on 2A being a map worthy of further consideration. And if it's approved, that one's held, and then we can go do that with the rest. Alternatively, if you want to say, look, the only one I like's 2A, vote to strike 3 and 4.
I don't want 2A to be what it ends up being, but I think 2A is a good starting point that could be.
So you're just holding it for further refinement and consideration. Because we'll have other maps submitted throughout this process, so we got to have somebody holding this map so we know this is one we're working off of.
Yeah, let's ask if there are any maps that we want to remove from the consideration at this time. I think would be easier.
Yeah, I would make a motion that we remove 4A from consideration.
Have any others?
We can take them one at a time, Mr. Chairman.
Quick question on that. When you remove 4A, let's say a citizen or somebody else comes in and wants to start with 4A, make some changes to it and bring it in with that.
It's gone. They'll need to start fresh from something else. So it's just because
That
they
was
may
my
make 2
question.
refinements and the board may feel like there need to be 20. So if we strike a map, let's strike a map and then
We'll have a completely clean number
Yeah.
going from there.
5A will be the next thing received, et cetera.
I mean, I feel like for us to actually get this done in a month, don't we need to just have something that we start with and say, here's what we got, and we're going to start tweaking it to try to bring the population together and meet certain
That's where you are going, Mr. Shipman. One of the things that we've learned, and that the state learned the hard way, and while we're probably not quite under as much scrutiny as they were, the consideration of all possible maps presented is one of those things you've got to do. One of the things the state was successfully challenged on was an entire bulk set of maps from various sources were just simply not considered, and that was one of the threshold issues in the challenges they're redistricting. So that's why we say, let's strike the maps, and if we get down to two, we can talk about two, we can work on refining it. If somebody brings you a new map at the next meeting, you consider it, determine, okay, hey, this is a good idea or not. But that's why we work on, that's why my recommendation, starting with culling the maps, you've at least considered it, and you've said, hey, we didn't find this one worthwhile.
Make a motion per map. So like in my case.
Yes, sir.
I made a motion to strike
4A.
4A.
So we have a motion and a second. Any public discussion regarding omitting or striking that map 4A? Seeing none. All in favor of
Zoom.
She's still there. Miss Bailey, are you still there? Miss Bailey? Okay.
My recommendation, I apologize, my mic was off there, to staff was to, for right now, let's place these people as panelists, so we're not dealing with a swap over in this issue, and let staff control the mute button, so that then they can raise the hand and be signaled, but they stay live as a panelist. So we'll let Mr. Cook do some work.
Miss Bailey,
So,
can you?
sorry, I was trying to let Jason know that I was passing on making any comment, so.
Okay.
I couldn't get the message through to him, so I'll just be quiet and continue to listen.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second to strike map 4A from consideration. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? None. Motion carries. We have a motion to strike any of the remaining 3 maps from further consideration.
I would tell you, just my opinion, I think that, any of the maps that show just the 3 districts, I don't know that it necessarily is a good move for me. I think that, we need to try to concentrate on 2 districts south of the bay and try to focus that point for my part. So for me, I like the 2A, the other ones, again, are all, have 3 across.
I would agree with that comment.
I'm sorry,
Go
Charlie.
ahead, Brian.
Charlie, what's the basis behind you saying only 2?
Well, here I am thinking about, so was it District 1, that McCormick's, the population of District 1, and looking at, even this year, even beginning of next year, the population, how things are going. So I feel like if you can split more of the South Walton into 2, and how, I don't know how necessarily how it would fade. Again, we're not putting people there, just looking at population. I think we can make it more evenly with 2 there. And then it does bring probably District 2 down, either in all at Defuniak or not, in a sense to bring that situation down, trying to get, right now it looks like you got, Defuniak is split into 2. Freeport is all in 1 with 2A, but I think if you can get 2, population-wise, looking at what's there and what's coming, it's just going to be easier down the road for everybody, in my opinion.
Yeah, and Kevin, you may know this off the top of your head. It's, if you cover South Walton with 2 districts, the remaining county, and there were comments about the municipalities about trying to not split those into separate districts. I don't know if it's mathematically
Possible to do it.
Do you have the municipalities? I know one time you had them split out. I don't remember.
I've got the municipality data from the census places for the numbers of people in each municipality, but I don't have a current map to show y'all with that right now. If y'all want that.
Ballpark
information.
5,900 in each municipality. Freeport, as of the census, was about 60 people below Defuniak. So 58, high 5,800 to low 5,900 is the spread. So
Close to
Defuniak and Freeport.
12,000.
Yep.
Close
Well,
to 12,000 between the two.
that's right.
Yeah.
Are we allowed to consider, when we're doing this, any expectation in the future? Because I think most people would believe that Freeport is going to grow faster than the Defuniak over the next few years.
Not if it creates an imbalance in population. Now, that future expectation of where property is developable is something Mr. Pilcher was touching on. As part of that consideration, Mr. Shipman, sure, you can look at that to say, look, we can put that in this district, but we just need to go and understand that district's never going to grow. That's it, what it is. It has to sustain this. But for instance, splitting Freeport as an example, thinking it's going to grow more than Defuniak, probably are not going to be able to find a way to do that unless you do it along some census tract, which is one of the things we would look to, or an existing political boundary. You know, splitting Freeport, I think we look at 2A, you split it right down there near Portland, which separates two existing precincts and distinct community and census tracts. So those would be things to consider, but that's certainly got to be a population-driven metric.
Well, the reason I asked is if you look at like 3A, where part of Freeport city limits are in, I guess, District 2.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't disturb me because it looks like the boundary is what they're in essence doing is using 331 and what would be east of 331 in Freeport.
Correct. And that's certainly something, if you're using that metric, would not have a problem splitting if you had to do that. Yeah, major arterial roadways, great thing to split on. That's a good one. Historical roadways or historical divisions of roads are another thing. So for instance, 331 is a larger roadway for the county, but as you talk about part of the north part of the county, County Highway 83 is as much of an ingress-egress from the north to the south into the city of Defuniak. So that's historically been something, and you see that's a split on that same map. So certainly you can figure those issues out. And that's on 3 that we're talking about. The issue with 3, if there is one, is just simply how sprawling District 2 becomes. Now, of course, it has a lot of vacant population in there, but that is going to be one of those issues you're going to have to account for.
There are parts of 1, 2, and 3 that are things that I would consider. I don't view it like I do number 4, which I think 4 is just needs to go to the scrapyard. Although on number 2, again, I don't know how when we talk about these maps, on number 2, if it's one we're considering, I would want what is the pink area to be District 5, which is what it currently is.
So if there's 10 of us up here, if you have time during the week, you could contact Kevin at the GIS department. He can really help you hone in on these population centers and what it means to change these boundaries, in case we want to explore other ideas. But I think we have a pretty good foundation anyway, at least to to start with. Are there any more comments or discussion from committee members? Yeah, Jim?
I just had one question. Like map 3 is kind of similar to map 4, where you have 3 districts in the south end of the county. Does anybody, I'd like to hear anybody's comment, either for or against, or why they think that would be either an asset or a detriment to 3 districts in the south end. And if people don't want that, then we could stick with the first, actually, even 1 also has 3 in the south end.
Well, we have some, a few audience members. Maybe someone in the audience might want to share their thoughts on that topic. Or is any public comment with regards to the area south of the Intracoastal, with having that 2 or 3 districts? Yes, ma'am. If you want to come up, we'd be glad to have you hear your idea.
No, I just want to say on all the maps, and I know we can't mention names, but I don't understand that District D4 Trey Nick. It's on every map that has not moved. What color is that? Is it green?
Which map, Ms. Morano?
Every one of them.
So in,
Talking about the area just north of the bay, Choctaw.
so
Beach.
on 3A, the district is shaded green, which would represent District 4. It's important not to look at the designation. If you look at the little name bubble where it says D4, D5.
Right.
That is the current district they serve in, versus in, it is also green on 4A versus on 1A it's green, and then on
Yeah, it's all of them.
2A, it is, 2A, that remains
I
green
think-
as well.
I think what she's asking, what that is their listed residence.
Okay,
That's the location of their listed
residents.
residence. Yes,
So on 2A, it's just a residence and it's green. That's it.
yes, ma'am.
Okay. You asked about south of the bay. When you talk about south of the bay, we're looking at Freeport, right? That's not south of the bay, right? That's north of the bay. Am I right?
Correct.
Yeah, but
Help,
we were
Gary?
having 2 different conversations.
Okay.
I was saying that I felt like there needed to be 2 districts south of the bay.
Right.
But I also feel like that Freeport, if possible, should all be in 1 district.
Okay,
I didn't mean that Freeport is in a district with south of the bay.
okay. So we were so the question was, do we want 3 districts south of the bay? Is that the question?
Yeah,
That
that
you
was
asked the
it.
audience?
The question was, what's the feeling, is there any
You know what the real
feedback?
feeling is? We just want to be representative.
mean,
I mean, that's the real feeling. You want to call a commissioner, you want to make sure the commissioner's in your district, you want to make sure the commissioner picks up the phone and talks with you. However way we do that, that's going to be wonderful.
Well, I think the question, Barbara, really is, would we rather have 2 districts that were totally contained south of the bay, or continue with the way it is right now, where you have 1 district that's totally south of the bay and 2 others that are partially south of the bay?
I think that with the population, I think my feeling would be 2 districts south of the bay, if we knew those commissioners are truly south of the bay commissioners.
In other words, 2 that were totally south of the bay.
I'm sorry, what, Gary?
So 2 of the districts would be totally south of the bay.
Yeah, but if it's south of the bay, then it looks like, how are you going to split that? Because Freeport,
Well, no, I'm
don't
not
even
talking
talk about Freeport.
no, I did not mean to imply that Freeport needed to be part of south of the bay.
Okay, so south of the bay would be what we would think of as District 5 and all of District 4.
Correct.
Correct.
Okay,
Yeah, and what I was saying about Freeport was, what I liked about map 2 was that all of the city limits of Freeport was contained in 1 district.
and I agree. But if we had 2 districts south of the bay, it would be what we know is District 4 and District 5, correct?
Not assigning.
Not assigning.
Assigning labels.
No, we're signing numbers.
Wait, one person, Robert.
No labels at this time. They would just be two
Well, you know-
districts south of the bay.
2 districts south of the bay. Okay, it might be easier for you, but it's taken me a little longer on my learning curve.
That's a
Yeah.
whole different conversation. We can't get ahead of
Well,
ourselves.
for two districts south of the bay, where is the line that goes south of the bay? Are we going south of 20?
I think in all practicality, Barbara,
Yeah.
which is why I got kind of a little bit testy on the labeling on map 2, is that the practicality of south of the bay is if you're going to have 2 districts totally south of the bay, they need to be either districts 4 and 5 or 1 and 5, because presently 1, 5, and 4 are south of the bay. 5 is totally south of the bay.
Right.
So
Okay.
you wouldn't take one of the 2 districts that doesn't touch south of the bay and move it. That would be, in my mind, probably some kind of political gamesmanship that
Okay.
I would not be in favor of.
All right, thank you, Gary.
Yes, ma'am, Ms. Reeves.
Good afternoon.
Hello.
Thank you very much. I think 2 south of the bay seems a good starting point, and y'all got some good work ahead. I believe there will, having been to these over the last 20 years, that there'll be several other maps come forth that will give you maybe a good choice. And I just brought up from last time, here are the maps that were presented
Well,
to the board last time, and it had, y'all had these maybe in your packet? They do. So kind of look at those, and there were quite a few maps in there that showed District 5 and, say, District 1, mostly, in South, you have to go up. But remember, redistricting is not about land, it's about people. It's one person, one vote. And so I think you're working good, and I think there'll be several more maps that will come forward for you to consider. And I would also maybe see Bobby Beasley. He did a really good presentation for the Rotary back in 2017 that did some of the population projections. And I know you have your own parameters with the United States Justice Department that you have to do, but taking into the growth in Freeport, taking in the growth in Watersound Origins, so you're looking at your numbers, and you're going to not be dead set on, but you might figure the population growth the next 10 years too in there, okay?
thank you. Ms. Johns. Mr. Bagby, you almost got called on, you were scratching your head.
Careful with that. Hi, Donna Johns. I just want to say I too agree that 2 commissioners south of the bay would be wonderful, and I agree with Barbara Morano in that we would really like them to be true south of the bay commissioners that would be willing to respond and to work on the county down there, because we have a little difficulty right now.
Thank you. Mr. Bagby.
Having been with Miss Brenda 10 years ago, and then 5 years before that when we had to do the little short term, I think everybody listening to y'all agrees it ought to be 2. The one question that came up or as a starting point, 2A, the one question that came up 10 years ago, when I think there were actually 3 districts in Defuniak Springs back then that touched Defuniak Springs, is if you have 2 south of the bay, you ought to, if you can, put Freeport in a district and Defuniak Springs in a district, because the people ought to feel like they have a commissioner, the people of that city. And I don't know if Kevin, is there a way you can give people a blank map if the citizens want to come in and go, well, what if we drew a boundary here? So if you included all of Defuniak Springs, the example I'll give you is that block east of Defuniak Springs, that in 2 is in District 4. If you moved it and maybe took it up just a little north of Defuniak Springs, You know, what would the population there, is there an interactive map in the GIS thing that?
It's not interactive online.
Oh, go ahead.
So
I'm sorry, go ahead.
it's not interactive online. If any member of the public would like to come and set up a time to meet with me, I'll gladly do that. And would encourage it. We did have several people from the public that did come in 10 years ago. And
Miss Brenda might have been one of those people.
and several of those were considered in the project. And having an outside set of eyes is always a great idea. And it would be a very helpful thing to have more people involved.
And then the last point I would make is, one of the things we talked about 10 years ago was when commissioners had to drive through another district to get to their district. So, and we ended up, poor Mr. Nick's got to drive through 2 districts to get to his district that's across the bay. And it just seems like that may not be a bad problem for Mr. Nick, because he could probably have his aide drive him in the county car. But if you're a citizen and you want to go meet with your commissioner, you shouldn't have to drive past 2 other commissioners' offices or through their districts to see your commissioner. So that would be one thing. And I agree, I guess my last point would be the projection. We know Freeport's growing. We know the greatest growth on the south end is going to be on water sound origins. Everybody knows that. It's not a surprise. 10 years from now, you want something that serves today and deals with the variances that Mr. Shipman talked about, but you also want something 10 years from now where you don't have what you've kind of got in District 5, where you have 10,000 more people in that district that has water sound origins than you do in one of the districts up north. So I would ask y'all to consider that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Bagby. Any other public comments regarding the map presentations? And, yes,
Just a second. Kevin, could you look at this map and tell me something about it, please? Which one? 2A, and I'm looking at the one that you made a copy of here.
We're looking at map
I need
2.
you to look at it right here.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. That tells me what I need to know. All right.
okay, and I don't know how we left Miss Bailey. I think she had a question.
Can I ask
Or-
Kevin a question?
Yeah, sure, go ahead, Tom.
Since we're looking at 2A, Kevin? And you know my math, so walk with me on this. If you look at map 2A, District 1, area-wise, is pretty big. And you're showing 14,124 population, right?
Yes, sir.
If you look at map 3A, the footprint changes, but the area shrinks, and you're looking at 14,606. I don't think there's a 500 population change in that much north.
You're
You're
if you'll
picking up
look,
Point Washington. You got south of the intercoastal waterway
And inlet, and
in one and not in the other, in Inlet Beach.
Oh, that's right, all right, we got inlet, I forgot about it.
That's right.
It hops the intercoastal.
Thank you, Kevin.
So let me say this, I think probably a good rule of thumb when we talk about south of the bay, because everybody's eye goes to that big mass of the water, is south of the intercoastal waterway.
Right.
So set that as kind of your line for that discussion point.
Okay, do we have Miss Bailey on Zoom? She's getting ready.
All right. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. On your 2A map, I think that's a good delineation for, sorry, I've got like multiple screens open trying to look at all your maps at one time. That's a good delineation for the south end, because it does give us 2 distinct districts. I would like, with what some of the other participants said, to the commissioner commissioners who represent those districts should be available in those districts and live in those districts, I think. And the other person that said something about not splitting up the cities, I'm not quite sure how y'all are gonna do that, and kudos to y'all for taking on this task, but I think keeping the cities in one district rather than potentially splitting them up like on 2A, you've got, I think it's, the Phoenix Springs is in 2 districts, and so just encouragement to keep the cities within one district if you can, and the 2A, the South Walton looks really good. I think that's a good delineation, so.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bailey. Now, I think you had submitted a question. Do you still have that question? You wanted to know if there are requirements for districts. What type of requirements are you asking about? Statutory requirements or?
So are the commissioners required to live in the districts they represent?
I'll let Mr. Atkinson answer that. Did you hear the question, Mr. Atkinson?
Let her ask again. I was working with Kevin on something there. I think the answer is yes, but let's have her ask that again, just in case.
So
She asked if the
whatever district the commissioner represents, he has to live in that district.
Absolutely, yes.
He can finish out his term.
Okay.
That's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, if for some reason a commissioner is districted out of their current district, they get to finish their existing term.
Correct, and I wasn't, redistricting would not be, that wasn't the issue. I just wanted to make sure that if they're representing us, they're actually living here with us and enduring some of the challenges and blessings of the area for which they're representing.
That is and will remain the rule.
Clay, that brings a question that I want to make sure I'm clear on. When we do this redistricting, the only commissioners that it would potentially impact are the ones that are up for election next year, correct?
Well, it'll impact all of them eventually, but the ones that will have the biggest impact on where if you should change the districts, then therefore redistrict one of the ones up for reelection in 22 out of their district.
Right. In other words, the commissioners that are elected right now that aren't running for reelection next year, regardless of what we do, they're still going to be commissioners until they're up for election.
Absolutely right. Yes, sir.
Can I make a request to Kevin on a map, since we're focusing on 2A? Could you take 2A and see if you could finagle it where you put all of Defuniak in one district?
That's what he and I were just talking about, Mr. Shipman. I was showing him how I think he probably can get there. And the one thing I was noting before I called over to answer the question that I'll go ahead and say for the record is this may well be one of those examples where we look at that map, if that happens, with the tan-colored District 2, if that no longer encompasses any Defuniak, we may look at those numbers both with and without prison population to see exactly how close it gets to working.
Right.
If you put it back in, just doing back of the napkin math, I don't actually have a napkin, so nobody ask for those notes, please. It probably works with the prison population.
And then, Kevin, when you're doing that tweaking, just so I'm humored, could you recolor this where the pink on this thing is District 5?
How about this for that? Why don't I call them District Tan, District Green, District Blue, District Pink, and District Yellow?
Well,
until such time that you determine a number for it.
well, to humor me, for the map I'm asking for, will you do one up, even if it's just for me, that is 2A, that has what you're calling Tony Anderson's district labeled under the color coding for District 5? And
Certainly.
that has a way that Defuniak Springs, if there's a way to finagle putting it all in one district.
Well, it's going to be a different, you'll give it a different title
It'll get assigned like 2B, 2C,
Right,
2D,
yeah, right.
2.
Yeah, you can call it whatever you want, but that, I would like to see a map like that.
I mean, I can definitely relabel it so that that part down in the pink is labeled as District 5. Yes, sir.
And trying to tweak the Defuniak into one district.
Certainly.
Okay.
I mean,
I think that
if you would
be-
like to stop by sometime, I'd love to work
I
that out
have
with
a
you.
trial next week, but as soon as I'm out of trial, I plan on coming and paying you a visit.
Okay.
Any other committee members? While Kevin is playing it fast and loose right now, any suggestions you might have
Let me
on
make some
the
notes.
existing maps?
That was the very consideration that I was sitting here looking at, is trying to put Defuniak Springs in the, fully encompassed in the same district.
Can we go ahead and call 1A and 3A?
You can make a motion.
We'll make a motion and somebody
I'll make that
seconds it.
motion. For the purpose of this meeting, I move we call maps 1A and map 3A.
So we have a motion
I'll second it.
and a second to call maps 1A and 3A. Any public comments regarding that? All right, we'll call a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? None. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda, presentation of public maps, ideas, or suggestions. We've kind of rolled all that into one with our prior agenda item, but are there any member of the public with any of those type suggestions? Ms. Reeves?
Mr. Chairman, I really love these individual maps that we have to take home and look at, and I know there'll be more forthcoming, but it was really helpful last time to also have bigger maps.
They're on the
They're just not on the wall, so I know you have, so that was helpful in a way.
Okay.
So that was a helpful.
Yeah, we will definitely start next meeting with at least 2 copies of 2A on boards that people can see. So we'll have 2A up for everybody.
Okay, thank you. Any other public comments?
Ms. Deedee's gonna hold it.
Oh, okay.
We have a mobile easel.
Board comments, any of those? Nothing? We're adjourned. Thank you.
Do what?
Now get to go to the middle school open house.
Get to go to your next meeting.